Welcome to this edition of First Fridays. Stephanie Hazen moved to Salem in 1977, right after graduating from Colorado State University's School of Veterinary Medicine. She owned and operated her own veterinary practice in Salem, selling it and retiring in 2010. She became interested in monarch butterflies after seeing several in the milkweed seed production fields at Heritage Seedlings Farm here in Salem in 2015. She called Oregon Field Guide and they sent a film crew down to Salem to film butterflies in the milkweed seed field. Some of that footage was used in the episode they made called Monarchs in Milkweed. That experience caused her and her husband, Ray Temple, to plant milkweed at home, and in 2017, Monarchs deposited eggs on their own plants. They raised, tagged, and released 50 monarchs that summer. One of their monarchs was spotted in Southern California 6 times that winter. Since becoming a master gardener in 2018 and a master melitologist the same year, Stephanie has been involved in educating the public about monarch butterflies, native bees, and the benefits of native plants in their gardens ever since. To get a closer look at Ray and Stephanie's backyard, see the 9-minute video she made several years ago called Our Backyard. Stephanie, thanks again for joining us. Go ahead and start your presentation.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. I get to talk about my favorite subject. So my talk is called Gardening for Butterflies and Moths in and around Salem, Oregon. And I've taken up photography as my hobby in my retirement. So most of the photos, unless otherwise labeled, I took. On this first slide, you can see an Akamon sphinx moth on the left, on the very pink zinnia. And in the middle, you can see a monarch butterfly on showy milkweed. And on the right, you can see a woodland skipper on some native Douglas aster. So to prepare, we're going to teach you how to prepare your Salem area garden for monarchs and other native butterflies. And I'm pretty much limited to the butterflies that I've seen in my backyard. So again, here's a monarch, a female depositing eggs on showy milkweed. Butterfly adults eat nectar from plant blossoms. They need water from shallow sources such as mud. They sip juices from rotting fruit and eat animal dung, some of them, which is a surprise. Many flowers, such as roses, tulips, and California poppy, don't produce nectar, so they're not useful for feeding adult butterflies. Again, butterflies eat nectar, not pollen. Bees eat pollen and nectar. Caterpillars, the baby moth or butterfly, caterpillars need something else altogether different. Caterpillars chew leaves, fruit, wild grasses, and flowers from plants called host plants. Some caterpillars are limited to one or a few host plants. Others are not so particular. When raised in captivity in crowded conditions, caterpillars even eat each other. So, adult butterflies must be supported with nectar-producing blossoms all summer long, mud and water to stay hydrated, and trees for perching and shade. So on the left is Clarkia. On the middle are California tortoiseshell butterflies sucking mud from a puddle at Lost Lake. And on the right is a fly. I believe that's a flower fly, except it has long antennae. So that's a bee, and in Coreopsis. So in a flower pot on our front, we have yarrow, which is very pretty, and it's not this yarrow is not native to Oregon, but it's okay to have a mix of native and non-native plants that produce nectar for butterflies to feed on. I like to grow zinnias from seed. Zinnias like these have single layers of petals and open nectar ports, making it easy to access the nectar that butterflies need. So in this simple flower, you can see all the pistils and stamens and access of the flower. But these I took a picture of at a nursery, and they've been hybridized and no visible pistils and stamens. And the access to the nectar ports is probably non-existent. And probably there's not much pollen produced because they've been hybridized for petals. The white yarrow, the western yarrow, is native to Oregon. And so that's a good one. The butterflies like to land on wide, flat spaces. Another one is not native, it's called dianthus. It's also known as sweet William. And I've grown that from seed, and I save seeds and replant every year. And I find lots of butterflies on our sweet William. The other thing about sweet William that I like is it comes in so many different colors. It's very beautiful. Leotris, or blazing star, is native to the Midwestern states. You can often buy their bulbs in flower store or garden centers in the springtime. And once established, the bulbs multiply. So blazing star, Leotris, is a very favorite nectar producing flower for butterflies and bees. Sunflowers and checker mallow in our yard attract a large variety of bees and butterflies. One common summer butterfly in the Salem area is the western tiger swallowtail. And so you can see how they like a nice big flat open space to land on to sip nectar. They overwinter as a chrysalis. And these two chrysalids were on a bird box in our front area. Caterpillars of western tiger swallowtails eat leaves of trees, such as willow and cottonwood. Sunflowers, like California poppy, produce lots of pollen, but little or no nectar. And this is a syrphid fly, also known as a hoverfly, also known as a flower fly. And it mimics bees, but you can tell it's not a bee because it has very short antennae and its eyes fill its face. So willow trees in our area are the earliest pollen and nectar producing species of plant for many bees and butterflies. The male and female plants are separate trees. Western tiger swallowtails use willow as a host plant for their caterpillars. So on the bottom left is a male willow blossom, and you can see all the pollen, the yellow pollen. And on the top is a female, and it doesn't have female tree, and it doesn't have pollen. Clarkia mina, also known as farewell to spring, is an easily grown native plant, and it self-seeds. So you could use it in a field, and it would just take over the area, or you could use it in a large flower bed. It's attractive to many bees and butterflies. In fact, I find bumblebees sleeping in the flowers at night. This is a sulfur butterfly. Their caterpillars feed on vetch, clover, and lupin. This butterfly was seen along the roadside at Basket Slough National Wildlife Refuge. We brought home some evening primrose seeds from the coast. That's the yellow flower on the lower left. And it opens at night. And it attracts Acamon sphinx moths because they are out feeding at night. The caterpillars will eat lepilobium, grape leaves, and tomato leaves. And they pupate in the soil over winter and emerge in the spring to become an adult moth. The upper left shows a picture of the caterpillar, and it's as big as my finger in real life. This is a picture I took one evening of an Acamon sphinx moth on a zinnia flower in our front yard. The silvery blue is a native butterfly, and its host plant is the lupin. And you can tell this silvery blue from other blue butterflies by counting dots on the wings. Lorquin's admiral are common in wet areas because they are attracted to willow and chokecherry and other tree leaves. They overwinter as a caterpillar. Caterpillars will curl a leaf around themselves to overwinter and finish metamorphosis or turning into adult butterfly the following year. Lorquin's admiral butterflies are one that actually eats animal dung. So flowers that attract butterflies and moths need to be easy to land on, and they need to have easy access to where the nectar is produced, called the nectary. This is a woodland skipper, and they come out in the late summer, early fall, and their caterpillar eats grass. Blossoms like this camellia are of no use to butterflies or bees because they can't access the pollen or nectar. So this is not a native plant, and this is a plant whose genes have been manipulated, and it's a hybrid. So it looks very pretty in the yard, but it doesn't support bees. Butterfly bush is named aptly because butterflies are all over it, as well as other bees and moths. But it's not native to our area, and it can become a native or an invasive plant when the seeds are produced in the late summer and spread. And if you got it into an area along a creek or a river, it would just spread as the water flowed and carried the seeds away. So if you want to have butterfly bush, you could buy a sterile seedless variety from a nursery. And our butterfly bush came from Dancing Oaks Nursery, and it doesn't spread, but it certainly produces enough nectar to attract butterflies. You have to think about some of these things because they can become invasive species. We see foxglove all over Oregon, but it is an introduced species. It can be accessed by bumblebees, but not at all by butterflies. And this is a picture at Cascade Head, and that's the Pacific Ocean. You see Lincoln City, and you can see that wild field is just full of foxglove, which is not native. It's beautiful, but it doesn't belong there. Sunflowers have no use. Snapdragons are of no use to butterflies because they can't access the nectar. Toadflax is an ornamental plant, and it's all over Eastern Oregon, and it's an invasive species that was an escaped garden plant. It was introduced to Eastern Oregon in the 1800s, and it very much looks like snapdragon. Tithonia, or Mexican sunflower, is easily grown from seed. It's a favorite of butterflies as well as the leafcutter bee seen on the upper left. On the right is a tagged monarch butterfly on Tithonia. You can see how it can land on the flower and access the nectar ports. And there's a little bit of a video. Okay. We talked about woodland skippers. The caterpillars eat grass. They feed at night and wrap themselves in grass stems by the day. They produce 1 or 2 broods a year, overwintering as caterpillars, and adults appear in late summer and sip nectar from a variety of flowers. Cabbage butterflies are not native. These are perched on twinberry honeysuckle, and they sometimes are a garden pest because they feed on plants in the cabbage and mustard family. They can be controlled on garden cabbage using BT, which is short for Bacillus thuringiensis, specific for butterflies and moths. If you apply BT widely, it will affect more than your targeted species, so limit it to actual food crops. Better yet, instead, cover your food crops with net bags. So on the internet, you can type in fruit protection bag, and very fine mesh bags, as fine as window screen, will pop up, And you can buy them as little as one that would cover your hand, bigger ones that would cover your whole arm, and giant ones that would cover small trees. And if you put these over your fruits and vegetables before the caterpillars are about, but after pollination has occurred, in other words, you already have your fruit, then you won't have these problems with caterpillars eating your cabbage. So this cabbage white butterfly was caught by a crab spider. And the crab spider is the white spider on the left, and he's got a hold of that butterfly. You know it's a butterfly because you can see on the antenna a knob on the end of the antenna, whereas moths don't have that. They have fuzzy antennae. The common wood nymph caterpillar feeds on grass while the adult eats rotting fruits, fungi, and a small amount of flower nectar. The caterpillar overwinters in patches of grass and finishes its life cycle in the spring. There's only one generation per year. So if you actually see adult common wood nymphs, you're pretty lucky. My favorite in the yard right now is Douglas aster because it blooms in late summer and fall when all the other plants are gone. So these are pictures of Douglas aster in my backyard with a western wood nymph and a bee whose name I can't remember right now, but it is actually it's a nest parasite of another bee that's also in my backyard. So it doesn't make its own nest, it uses the other bee's nest. This is goldenrod, California goldenrod, with a native bee on it. And it's also a late summer blooming flower. California tortoiseshell butterflies overwinter as adults, unlike others that overwinter as caterpillars or chrysalids. Their caterpillars eat ceanothus leaves. During the years of population booms, they migrate. So sometimes you'll see hundreds and thousands of them up on the Santiam Pass as you drive over. Ceanothus is also known as California lilac, and it comes in at least 3 different sizes: a creeping one that's a ground cover, a small shrub, and a very tall shrub. I went up to Lost Lake in the Cascades and I saw a swarm of California tortoiseshell butterflies puddling at Lost Lake in the Santiam Pass, and those are my feet. And you can see going toward the lake, quite a few butterflies there. There are at least 300 host plants for the painted lady butterfly, including thistle, aster, mallow, pearly everlasting, and hollyhock. These butterflies occur on every continent except Australia and Antarctica. In our area, they migrate over 6 generations from Mexico to Canada and back in one season. But they also migrate in Europe down to Africa. I've seen television shows about how they have a 3,000 to 4,000 mile migration. So this is the painted lady butterfly. This is a monarch butterfly in my backyard, nectaring on shot milkweed. And if I remember correctly, this is the first butterfly that ever came to our backyard. I got so excited, I went and got the camera. You can hear children calling in the background. So you can see how the butterfly is landing on the flat flower and searching for nectar ports with its tongue. Monarch butterflies are beautiful orange, white, and black butterflies that belong to the Nymphalidae family of butterflies. Different subspecies of monarchs are found in North and Central South America, Australia, Hawaii, and New Zealand. They even have a white monarch found in Hawaii. This map shows the year which these butterflies were reported in all these different countries. I think this is because the butterflies were taken on ships or cargo and introduced to these other countries, and they had enough of the correct plants or similar plants that the butterfly could at least complete its life cycle. Monarch butterflies can fly about 5 miles an hour. And on their east coast of the United States, their migration is 4,000 to 5,000 miles long, from Mexico up into Canada. In the United States, we have two distinct populations of monarch butterflies. The East Coast population overwinters in Mexico. The West Coast population overwinters in California and Baja California. And then you can see on the tip of Florida, there's a small non-migratory population. So the reason we have an East Coast and a West Coast population is the Rocky Mountains. They are unable to fly over those mountains. And so the adults overwinter either in Michoacan, Mexico and fly north, or they overwinter in the California coast and fly north. So I'm just going to talk about the West Coast migration from now on. So the adults that overwintered in California, they spent about 6 months there. They leave in the spring and fly north. They lay eggs in Northern California and then die. So all of the ones that overwintered die, but a new generation of butterflies emerges in about a month. And then it continues to fly north and look for milkweed and then lays eggs. And each new generation works its way up to Canada, creating 4 to 5 generations. The last generation only flies all the way back to California to spend 6 months, never having been there before, but somehow finds the right place. And you can see where the East Coast population migrates on this map. So a long time ago, 20 and 30 years ago, the population of butterflies overwintering in the California coast was over 1 million. So if you look at the chart in 1997, they had 1.2 million. If you look at the blue line, they only checked about 100 sites. Over time, the amount of butterflies counted in the winter by volunteers has decreased. You can see in 2020, there were only about 2,000 butterflies counted all winter long, yet they were monitoring almost 300 sites. So our butterflies almost became extinct in the year 2021. Then we had a resurgence in 2022. We had about 250,000 monarchs, and nobody knows why they resurged. By understanding the biology of the monarch and a few propagation techniques for growing their host plant, milkweed, you can help the monarch to recover. And this is a female monarch butterfly nectaring from swamp milkweed in my backyard. So this is a mimic. This is not a monarch. The horizontal line across the wings lets you know it's a viceroy. Viceroys evolved to mimic monarchs to avoid predators. That's because if a bird eats a monarch butterfly, they spit it out. They taste bad and they're poisonous if enough is eaten, because monarch caterpillars only eat milkweed, and milkweed sap contains poison cardinalid compounds. Monarch caterpillars eat only milkweed, and the family is called Asclepias. There are about 100 species of milkweed that can support monarchs caterpillars. If we don't have milkweed plants, we'll have no monarchs. There are about 6 native milkweed plants or types of milkweed in Oregon. 2 of these are native to the Willamette Valley where we live. That would be narrowleaf milkweed, Asclepias fascicularis, and showy milkweed, Asclepias speciosa. So this picture is of a monarch butterfly trying to find nectar on an early milkweed blossom. It also, because it's there early, it might be the female laying eggs. So caterpillars don't eat dried out plants. So keeping plants fresh and new is important. Trimming out mature dry leaves, planting some milkweed in the shade, as well as some in the sun. Having several varieties of milkweed can help to provide milkweed to the monarch caterpillars throughout the summer. Also, having fresh blossoms of other types of nectar-producing plants in late summer and fall is critical for monarchs migrating to their southern wintering grounds. Showy milkweed was more common in the Willamette Valley before people started using herbicides such as Roundup, before they had clean weedless farming practices. We used to have the roadsides and hedgerows with flowers and native plants. Now the farmers just mow everything flat and spray everything out so that they have a pure crop. Monarch, of the three types of native, or of the two types of native milkweed for the Willamette Valley, showy milkweed blossoms first. So it blooms early in the summer and is finished blooming early. And once it's established, it spreads vigorously through rhizomes underground. So this is a picture of showy milkweed. Swamp milkweed, called Asclepias incarnata, is native to all the other states of the United States, or many of them, but not native to Oregon or the West Coast. But it tolerates being wet and grows to a height of 4 to 6 feet. And it blooms mid-season into early fall. So this would be one that once it got established, you would need to keep watering it because it has very shallow roots because it's meant to grow in swampy areas. It does grow nicely in large containers as well. This is swamp milkweed. It's the perfect garden milkweed. It doesn't spread or get out of control like the other, like showy milkweed, and it makes nice cut flowers. Avoid touching milkweed sap if you're cutting flowers. If you got it in your eyes, it'd be very irritating, and you would need to go to the emergency care because it can cause corneal ulcers. Also, you don't want to contact the sap in your mouth at all because it's poisonous. So we talked about it. It needs water, and it's got a shallow taproot, and it's easy to transplant. Swamp milkweed. In our garden, many other insects come to sip nectar from swamp milkweed. Besides monarchs, swallowtails enjoy swamp milkweed very much. The fall blooming milkweed is called Asclepias fascicularis, or narrowleaf milkweed. It's native to much of the western United States, including the Willamette Valley. It's about 1 to 2 feet tall and blooms later in the summer, thereby extending the blooming season. It spreads via rhizomes and through seeds. Milkweed starts can be purchased in the spring at native plant sales. You'll get your milkweed growing a lot faster if you buy a plant or a plug rather than seeds. Milkweed purchased from stores may have been treated with systemic pesticides, neem oil, or Bacillus thuringiensis, which can all kill caterpillars. Ask before you purchase. One not to buy is tropical milkweed. It's widely available, but not native. It should not be used in the garden and may in fact contain such high levels of cardenoleds as to be toxic to monarch caterpillars. So don't purchase or plant the milkweed that has yellow and orange flowers, tropical milkweed. You can collect your own milkweed seeds or get them from friends. Milkweed seeds need cold stratification to germinate. So in the wild, the seeds would float away on these white fluffy things called coma, C-O-M-A, and they would land on the ground and it would get cold and wet, and that would be natural cold stratification, and then they would sprout in the spring. But you can plant milkweed at any time by copying the cold stratification by placing the seeds in the refrigerator in a plastic bag with water and have them wet for a minimum of 2 weeks, it could be longer, and then plant outside or in a greenhouse in mid-April. Cover with just a tiny bit of soil and press the seeds into the ground. They'll germinate when the soil temperatures reach 60 to 70 degrees. They can be started in a greenhouse in any season. When starting seeds for later transplant, it's best to use very tall containers to allow the roots to grow long. Milkweed does not like to have crowded roots. What you see here is called cone containers, and these are used for starting trees as well. These pictures I took from the internet. An adult milkweed plant is hard to dig up. You break the roots off and they don't survive. So that's why we either start our own or buy plugs or dig up rhizomes. All right, this is just a copy of winter rains and cold temperatures. Cold stratify the seeds and allowing them to merge in mid-May when the ground warms. You need to be patient. Milkweed is one of the last plants to emerge in the spring. And they don't bloom the first year that you plant them. They may not bloom until the 3rd year. So this is a field of showy milkweed at Heritage Seedlings Farms, and this field is grown for seed production. Milkweed has its own little host, or it hosts quite a variety of insects. This is a milkweed bug, and they like milkweed because they lay eggs on the milkweed seed pods, and their larvae eat milkweed seeds. If you want to collect milkweed seed, it's best to collect it just as the seeds are brown and the pod hasn't opened up. If you wait till the pod opens up, then the seed floats away and there's all this white fluffy stuff called coma that makes it hard to separate. So Tom Landis is seen here barely opening the milkweed pod. The seeds are ripe, they're brown, and he's shucking the seeds off onto a cloth. If you let it open, then you can see how hard it would be to separate the seeds from the coma, which allows the seeds to float through the air. Whereas if you get them a little early, you can just shuck them out. By saving milkweed seeds, more milkweed can be shared and grown locally. And this is a picture of narrowleaf milkweed in my kitchen. So this showy milkweed is a year old, and it'll take 2 years to get its large leaves and produce flowers. And it'll take 3 years to produce runners. So the young milkweed starts really don't even look like the milkweed adult plant. So it's good to label your plants so you know for sure what's coming up. So to feed adult migrating butterflies from May through September, you need flowering plants in addition to milkweed. Think of 5 reasons you might consider growing pollinator plants from seed. You could have more plants for less money. You could grow seeds to share. You can plant in succession to have flowers blooming late in the season. You can plant lots of them as a cover crop to outcompete weeds. You might have a greater variety to choose from. You can cover a large area. You can fill spaces between trees and bushes. And you can avoid plants that have been pre-treated with insecticides. So these are all reasons to save your own seeds or buy seeds and grow from seed. Think of reasons to buy plants instead of seeds. Well, there's a lot less work. You get a sooner blossom, faster to maturity, important for milkweed, which takes 2 to 3 years to mature. Sometimes it's easier to reap and you'll have a higher survival rate. This is a milkweed sap. I picked a leaf off of a plant and the sap is dripping down the plant. Milkweed sap is extremely irritating to human skin. If you get it in your eyes, you flush it out immediately and seek medical help. Blindness from corneal ulcers can result from getting the sap in your eyes. The other thing you see on this picture is a chrysalis. So this is the caterpillar turned into a chrysalis, which will turn into a butterfly. Show a milkweed seed production field at Heritage Seedlings near my house. So at least 14 different pollinators use milkweed as a source of nectar and pollen. This is a western tiger swallowtail, and you can see a honeybee on the right. You can see a taconid fly on the upper right. That fly is a parasite in that it lays its eggs on caterpillars of various insects. And the caterpillars will actually be eaten alive by the taconid fly larvae. This is a painted lady, and their caterpillar eats thistle, but the adult likes getting nectar, and this is narrowleaf milkweed. This is a female Anna's hummingbird sipping nectar from showy milkweed. This is a native bumblebee called Bombus chrysioculus. It's attractive to milkweed. Milkweed pollen is big. It's called pollinia. And not just any insect can pollinate the milkweed. Their leg slips down into this little hole and pollinia stick to it. And then they go to another milkweed blossom and their leg sticks down that hole. And so it takes a very large insect to pollinate milkweed. I'm going to go back to the previous slide. Let's see, you can see those bees standing there and their legs are slipping down into a little hole just by mistake. And that's where the pollinia reside. So they pull it out, and if they're not a big insect, they can actually get stuck there. I've actually rescued honeybees that were stuck with their legs in the holes where they get the pollinia. This is an Anna's swallowtail. Their caterpillars eat lomatium, fennel, and plants of the carrot family. This adult butterfly is nectaring on showy milkweed. Monarchs taste with their feet. Although they have 6 legs, they only use 4 of them to stand on, the first 2 legs being vestigial, held close to their bodies. A male monarch can be told from a female because the lines are thinner and they have 2 androconia, or black spots on the hind wing, that are a source of sexual pheromones. So you can see the narrower wing bars and you can see the 2 dots, the androconia. So that makes this a male monarch butterfly. He's on showy milkweed. Male monarchs aggressively chase each other. And they chase other females in order to mate with them. This is a pair of mating monarch butterflies. So this female monarch butterfly is carefully laying eggs. She's chosen an immature milkweed plant, and she's laying one egg underneath a leaf, and then she's flying far away to lay another egg. She would like to lay all of her eggs on immature plants because she knows they won't dry out and the caterpillars will have something to eat. So in the upper left, a female monarch is laying eggs. The upper right is a monarch caterpillar. And the lower right, under the leaf, is a monarch egg. These eggs can be hard to spot under the leaves and the flower buds. A monarch undergoes complete metamorphosis from egg to caterpillar to chrysalis to adult in about 30 to 45 days, depending on the weather. Cold weather slows them down. Warm weather might speed them up a little bit. If you get a really close look at the eggs, they have a rib side. It makes me think of accordion-sized eggs. The first instar, or the first caterpillar that hatches out, actually eats the egg case and then begins to eat the leaf around it. So here's probably a second instar. You can see how tiny it is with my husband's finger behind it. And it's on narrowleaf milkweed. And they continue to grow. And finally, they molt 5 times, and each stage is called an instar. So this is 5th instar. This is as big as they get. There's another large one on narrowleaf milkweed. The monarch caterpillars eat a lot, so raise plenty of milkweed plants. I would start with at least 6 plants. So here's another caterpillar. And another one. And another one. So if you raise caterpillars in captivity, you need to separate the tiny caterpillars away from the bigger ones, and sometimes just from each other so they don't get eaten. Even crowding 5th instar caterpillars in the same enclosure will result in some caterpillars being cannibalized. So there's some people who think you shouldn't raise them in captivity for fear that you wouldn't do a good job and would cause more trouble. So the real legs are on the left. Those are the real legs, and the pro legs or suction cups are on the right. And it makes it confusing for a predator to tell the head from the tail, but the head is on the left. So the caterpillars eat the flowers as well as the leaves. Only 1 to 3% of monarch caterpillars make it into butterflies. They have a lot of enemies, insects such as calcid wasps, taconid flies, trichogramma wasps, parasite eggs, and caterpillars killing them. Spiders, birds, praying mantids, and wasps eat caterpillars. And then if they're crowded, they get infections such as a nuclear polyhedrovirus, OE, and a fungus plague in monarch caterpillars. So this is the life cycle. You can see the adult butterfly and an egg, and the hatched caterpillar eats its eggshell, and then it turns into a caterpillar, and then it turns into a chrysalis, and then it emerges. If they have a parasite called Ophrocystis electroscira, shortened to OE, then some of them won't make it to adulthood. And the parasite has a reproductive stage where the spores are on the wings of the adult, and they kind of fall off onto the leaves, and the baby caterpillar eats that, and then they get infected, and some of them their chrysalis turns black and they die, and they don't emerge and turn into butterflies. So again, if you are raising butterflies in captivity and you have this disease, you're most likely to spread more of it. Wasps are meat eaters, and they seek out monarch caterpillars to eat and take them to the nest to feed their own young. The European paper wasp was responsible for eating large numbers of monarch caterpillars. This was a wasp on a sunflower in my yard. The European mantis eats monarch eggs, caterpillars, and adults. They're identifying, we know this is a European praying mantis, which is not native because of the white spot under its right armpit. And we know it's a female because its abdomen is quite large, it's full of eggs. This is a praying mantis. So this is a tachinid fly. We talked about them. Their larvae bore into the caterpillar, eating it from the inside out. You can clip some leaves and bring that with caterpillars on them and bring them inside to raise caterpillars in safety. You don't need to touch the caterpillar at all. In fact, you probably shouldn't. If you're going to raise butterflies, there's a 4 to 6 week commitment of time to raise a butterfly from an egg to emergence. In 2015, my husband and I brought 2 caterpillars inside to raise and ended up taking them on vacation to Bandon and back. We took milkweed stems and leaves in the camping refrigerator. Caterpillars move around a lot, so some thought needs to be put into confinement. So what we did is we erected a screen tent on our back porch and made a caterpillar nursery. You can see our stock tanks with 3 types of milkweed in it. We've got collapsible laundry hampers with a very fine mesh and inverted them over the milkweed. When the caterpillars turned into chrysalids, we cut the stems and hung them with clothespins on lines strung inside that screen tent. So this is the inside of the screen tent in our backyard. And then we allowed the butterflies to emerge and we could safely catch them. And we could safely keep them away from all of their predators. When a caterpillar is ready to form a chrysalis or a pupa, it makes a silk pad to hang on to and holds a J form for about a day. So you can see the white silk, and the caterpillar turned its back end, which is got hooks in it, and it hung itself from the silk. The organ that holds on to the silk pad is called a cremaster. So that's what suspends the caterpillar from a leaf or a branch or wherever it's going to hang while it's a chrysalis. This is an internet picture, a close-up of the cremaster attached into the silk button. After a few minutes of wiggling and squirming around, the caterpillar sheds its skin and a chrysalis is formed. Nobody knows why a monarch chrysalis has such beautiful gold dots. Did you know you can tell the sex of the monarch butterfly while it's in the chrysalis? Females will have a line just under the holdfast tubercles, and the males will have a little dimple. So on the left is a female, on the right is a male. So this is a diagram of chrysalis, and you can kind of see through it. So you could see into the chrysalis and know where the head and wings were and the antenna, and you could tell if it was a male or a female. So the day the butterfly emerges from the chrysalis, it loses its green color and becomes transparent, showing the orange and black colors of the adult. And then this is a video next, showing the emergence of one of the butterflies in my kitchen. The chrysalis needs ample space below it for the butterfly to emerge, to hang to dry and inflate its wings for 2 to 4 hours. At this stage, the butterflies are easy to catch. They're not released until they're flying strong and the weather is warm. They may be kept for 1 to 2 days if necessary and fed a 1 to 4 sugar solution of macerated watermelon. If the weather is warm and dry, let them go the same afternoon. So by planting milkweed flowers, raising and tagging butterflies, you can contribute to citizen science and help the monarch population recover. Dr. David James is the scientist on the West Coast who administers the tagging program and recovery program. And this is a map of release and recovery points for Washington tagged monarchs in 2017. So if you want to participate in citizen science, if you get monarchs laying eggs in your backyard, you can obtain sticker tags from Dr. David James of Washington State University. You apply the tags to the mitten, which you can imagine a mitten or a hand on this butterfly, and this one's applied a little bit too far back. It should be closer to the body. People in California spend their winters looking for tagged butterflies to photograph and report to Dr. James. This tag reads monarch at wsu.edu B6576. So the year that we raised butterflies and tagged them, we sent Dr. James the data of the date and where we released which butterfly and which number would be on the tag. This is how to hold a butterfly for tagging. Just clasp its wings together between your fingers. It helps to have someone peel the tag off the sticker so that it helps to have 2 people do it. Newly emerged butterflies seem unaware and do not fly away and are easy to catch. They often land on you. This tag is placed too far down and it should be rotated 90 degrees. And it should be up closer to the butterfly's body. So this butterfly landed on my husband's face. So this is from the internet. This was the butterfly that we released, and it was seen 550 miles away from Salem in Santa Cruz. It was seen by John Dayton. And it was actually altogether spotted 6 different times. And it was documented to have lived 7 months. And before that, nobody knew that butterflies could live that long. So this is from Dr. David James Pacific Northwest Butterfly Facebook page. And this is the progress of this year's butterflies. So we're doing well. This summer, we had over 200,000 butterflies in Oregon. No, that's not right. We had over 200,000 butterflies overwintering in Southern California, and we've had several hundred butterflies reported in Oregon. It'd be fun to take a field trip to Elkton. They have a butterfly pavilion, and in June through September, they're open Tuesday through Saturday, and you can actually walk into the pavilion, a screened area, and see eggs, caterpillars, and butterflies. And on the upper left, you can see their butterflies nectaring on verbena. So if we all plant milkweed and flowers and don't use insecticides, we can let nature take its course, and we can contribute to the resurgence of monarch butterflies. So we'll be helping other insects as well.
All right, we have had some questions that have come up from the audience. So Stephanie is going to be gracious and answer those questions for us. First question, how long did the emergence process take?
I would say that took about 4 to 5 minutes.
Wow, okay. Where in Portland or throughout our state, or at least the western part of Oregon, can you buy milkweed that's ready to plant?
Well, one thing to do is call ahead to your local nurseries and see if they have them. Another thing is to go online and look for there's a website that lists all the native plant sales in Oregon. So it lists all the Soil and Water Conservation District native plant sales, and it's updated every year. There is a native plant nursery in Portland called Bosky Dell, Boskydell. So that's a source. And then the Native Plant Society of Oregon also has a listing on their website of native plant nurseries.
Thank you. And also, just so you all know, as listeners, the Marion SWCD does have a native plant sale, and our pickup time for that is the beginning of March. However, orders start online, I believe, in January. So you can check our website for more information. And our last question, how do you control aphids in milkweed?
Well, you don't want to use insecticides because you'll kill monarch caterpillars. So the best way to control aphids is to hose them off with a stiff spray of water, or put on some gloves and just squish them individually and leave them in place. The smell that comes out of squished aphids actually attracts their predators, which are ladybugs.
Interesting. All right. Well, that's a good, helpful gardening tip. Thanks again, Stephanie, for answering those questions for us.
Yep. This is Linda Boyer. Without her salvaging the milkweed seeds and growing a commercial field of milkweed near our home, no monarchs would have found their way to our backyard. None of the subsequent stories would be told. And you and I would never have met. So thank you, Linda. Most of all, I appreciate my husband, Ray Temple, who shares my enthusiasm for all things nature. Thanks for coming.
Stephanie, thank you so much for your presentation and teaching us all about butterflies, and especially the monarch butterflies. Hopefully you guys will be able to join us for future presentations of First Friday. Until then, we'll see you later. Thank you.